Well, go ahead, Josh. Take us into the next segment.
Okay, we've got Nirvana's Incesticide, and it is considered a compilation album after the success of Nevermind. They they didn't have another album ready, so they kind of, I guess I'm guessing the recording, the album company label decided to like add these, back then, like they released songs on singles and kind of on compilations that weren't on Nevermind or Bleach. And so they cobbled all of those different things together and put them on this. And then there's some different,
there's a long tradition of that, obviously, in music.
Yeah.
Beatles, Smiths, Rolling Stones,
sure,
you name it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not unusual, but I guess in
GNR Lies.
Right. After a massive album such as Nevermind, I think they were scrambling to put more product out. And there's some different versions of songs they've already covered, like on Bleach or Nevermind, that are different kind of alternative takes, or, like a hard rock version, I think they called one of the songs on here.
Do you know they originally called this album Cash Cow? because it was basically like Sub Pop was like, we got a bunch of stuff that we haven't released, and Nirvana's like, yeah, we're going to release it too, but they decided they were going to call it Cash Cow because it was just taking advantage of the new stuff. Yeah.
Nice. So I wasn't super familiar with this album. I definitely listened to it at some point along the way, but I don't think I had the context for what it was about. And I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It's not as good as like a quote unquote like all originals album. I feel like there's, like you said, they're kind of cashing in a bit. I felt that a little bit, but I think it starts out really strong with Dive and Sliver, and then kind of, it shows what makes Nirvana special ultimately, or kind of like what led Nevermind to being special. And then there's some like BBC session songs that it transitions into with Been a Sun and Turn Around, and some of those are Vaseline covers, which is a band that they really liked. I think they covered them again on like the Unplugged album, right? At one
sure
point.
do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those songs are pretty strong. This is a pretty, I want to say this is a pretty listenable album for sure. It's just not as strong as Nevermind. And then I think towards the end, they add some more originals that hadn't been released on any album, like Mexicans, Hairspray Queen and Aero Zeppelin and Big Long
famously
Now.
Aneurysm.
Yes, and Aneurysm is the last song, which is, I don't know, I feel like you can tell which songs are stronger on this album, more so than kind of like hidden gems. I think there's standout tracks like Aneurysm more so than other.
Did you watch the Nirvana Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
So the idea behind it when they played live, obviously Kurt Cobain's not there, is they had 4 different female singers front. So like they had like Saint Vincent and Lorde and stuff like that. But they had Kim Gordon do Aneurysm.
Oh, nice.
And she did it exactly as you would imagine Kurt Cobain, like just completely raw, visceral, like unhinged. It was like in the aftermath of her divorce from like Thurston Moore, and she's there. And I remember there were a lot of people that were like, this is awful, it's not on tune and stuff like that. And I'm like, boy, you don't know what Nirvana is if you didn't think that like Kurt Cobain wouldn't love like basically like Kim Gordoning, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like it's like it was just so perfect. But and I don't mean to pick on Matt, but I could definitely see Matt going like, oh, I don't like that at all. It's like all the stuff with Sonic Youth I don't like. She's kind of like abrasive. There's not a lot of melody, but like when you listen to Aneurysm, it's like pure, just intensity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it was. So I would strongly recommend you go back and watch that performance because
I'll definitely check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I guess the parts I don't like on this album are when Cobain gets like really screechy and abrasive. He kind of, and I think he's a little bit of a troll in that way, or he likes the
well, maybe you don't want to watch that performance then at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because
like
that's what they lean into.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can definitely still watch. I will still watch it. But Hairspray Queen and like Beeswax, they're kind of, when he kind of goes into like the the extreme end of his singing. That's kind of turns me off at times, and it goes into the noise rock, and that those songs I didn't like as much. But overall, I think this is a pretty good listen.
Yeah, like you could pretty much take this as an album,
Yeah.
couldn't you? I mean, it's like there's some real top tier stuff on this, like Sliver and Been a Sun. I mean, those could be on pretty much any Nirvana album you've got. Like I've always felt like Aneurysm is the perfect distillation of the part of them that's confrontational and challenging, but yet somehow you still can listen to it. It's got that great long intro, guitar driven intro. There's a great live version of it on From the Muddy Banks of the Wiscod, the live album that they do. And it was just one of those songs that whenever they played live, whether it be that or like Reading Festival or even later when it's played at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame without even Kurt Cobain there, it works. Then there's the new wave poly version of it, which makes the song completely different. It's weird though, because the lyrics are so stark of that song, and then like to have a new wave beat of it is, it sounds almost like a Buzzcocks song.
That's right.
Which he did love the Buzzcocks, so I mean, both he and Kirsten Novoselic are there. There's also 4 different drummers on this album, and when you know that and you listen, you can begin to tell the difference between the various styles of drummer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dave Grohl and
Chad Channing, and there's just everybody who drummed for. Let's give credit where credit is due. Chad Channing, Dan Peters, Dale Crover, and Dave Grohl.
Yep.
So if there's 4 different drummers on this, and I think Chad Channing was the drummer who was on Bleach, and then by the time Nevermind rolls around, Dave Grohl had been there, but there's others. So So it's an interesting time capsule. It doesn't feel like a cash grab because of the variety on the album and because the high quality is high. This is another one of these. It's almost incomprehensible in the era of content like we have now and accessibility of content. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to think. You hear these stories when you do Coming This Decks. Like, I remember there was that Prince album, right, that didn't get released for years and stuff. And now, of course, we know it and have it, like, immediately. Yeah. But for years, it was just sort of floating around as, like, a legend. And, these songs were sort of floating around for years. And people had them in bootlegs, but they'd never been formally released. So this was an attempt to, like, kind of clean them up and give them to folks. And it just that's just one of those things that's just of another era, the idea of like bootlegging cassette tapes, and it just was such a big deal when I was growing up, and now like it just doesn't exist anymore, or as much as it does, it's all digital, right? And I do feel, not to go all old head, but I do feel that when stuff was harder to get sometimes, there was a gravitas to it that I don't know if we have anymore.
I had that with Weezer, and like they had all these B-sides and stuff, and there was always people talking about, oh, this is like a really great B-side, and they had like Japan releases and like all of these things. So I remember like getting,
and then you go to like a music store, or in my case I'd go to the Shore and stuff, and people would literally have these stands, right, where they would be just handwritten, like the name of the show and like deep cut, or they'd get names, right, they'd give these compilations of songs like a name that became like part of the mythology of different stuff. So, and that's basically what this is, but cleaned up. And in some ways I think this shows Nirvana at the most like how Kurt Cobain would have wanted it. I think like a little bit messy at times, poppy and catchy at times, confrontational. In that way I think it's a little bit more faithful to like what Kurt Cobain's thought, and for that we always talk Kurt Cobain. Kirsten Novoselic had similar sensibilities, right? So I think it's actually similar to what they would have imagined, their version of what they wanted to sound like was like. But that was not as mainstream, and so it was a nice little counterbalance to Nevermind.
Like you said, it kind of shows his range and interests. We always talk about the albums that he liked or the bands he liked, and they were kind of all over the place. He had an eclectic musical interest, I think.
How about this too? Aneurysm was originally released as the B-side to Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh jeez.
As a single, so
what a 1-2 punch.
That's quite the 1-2, right? And so Yeah. And Been a Sun was originally on an EP called
Yep.
Blue. Yep. So a lot of these had been floating around and had been released in EPs or the Kill Rock Stars compilation. I think that's where like Beeswax was and stuff like that. So there's Mexican Seafood was on a compilation, Teriyaki Asthma Volume 1, which is quite the compilation name. So, yep. Yep.
Jeez.
And also the liner notes of this album are famous. I own this album, and it's basically like Kurt Cobain ahead of his time, I guess, like basically giving like a very tersely worded statement about how much he hated homophobia, racism, and misogyny. So Kurt Cobain, woke before there was woke, my friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone can call Kurt Cobain woke now.
It's well, the famous first line, I have it pulled up because the version I had did have this. It says, "If any of you in any way hate homosexuals, people of different color, or women, please do this one favor for us. Leave us the fuck alone. Don't come to our shows and don't buy our records." So, on the right side of history, Kurt Cobain right there.
Yeah,
So,
really.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, it's an essential. I mean, Nirvana made so few albums; it's kind of an essential part of their.
Well, some would
discography.
say non-essential because you could probably. There's a lot of people that for Nirvana, Nirvana is Nevermind, In Utero, and Unplugged in New York, and yeah, you'll throw in Bleach, but this one kind of gets forgotten. But I do think to truly understand them, you do need this because it's a different, I think, more faithful nod to their influences in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.